So today is an incredibly special day. I am so excited and grateful to be here with Kim Thomas, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer at OneAmerica. Kim, congratulations on all of the amazing things that you've already accomplished this year, and thank you for taking the time to be on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we found each other. You have done some great work and inspiring work. I'm just thrilled and privileged to be a part of this discussion.
Yeah, I am. I'm really super looking forward to learning from some of your wisdom. And before we get into that like really everybody listening's in for a treat because you're gonna learn some actionable tools. Kim's gonna pull back the curtains on some of the amazing things that have really helped her throughout her career. But before we get into that, can you share a little bit with us about a situation or a person that either inspired you to greatness or maybe something that happened that was uncomfortable, but then you ended up being grateful for it. Sometimes we were talking about before we went live is sometimes, greatness comes from inspiration and something very positive, and sometimes greatness comes from being uncomfortable. So would you mind sharing kind of what has inspired you to care so deeply about people and ascend to where you are today?
Absolutely. And actually, the story is rooted in fear of like just sharing the story. And I have now felt like this is a part of my journey and who I am. And so I embrace it. But really, I think a very pivotal moment for me was when I was 7 years old. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and my father struggled with alcohol addiction. And so much so that there were times when we didn't know where our next meal would come from. And I just had a moment where I choose not to have this be my path because my mother was so dependent on her husband, my dad. And I want to be able to make a way for myself that I know that I will be fine, my family will be fine. And it was really at that moment that I decided I'm going to college, I'm going to work hard in school, and I'm going to create a path for myself where I can be great. And that has really been the foundation of who I am. And I've really been able to build upon that throughout my life.
I love this story. I don't love that you and your mother had experienced that, but I I really love how you sharing it because so many times, we're at a crossroads. I mean, it probably happens all the time where we can go one way or go the other way, whether it's a conversation, whether it's throwing our hat into the arena for a role, it's sticking up for being paid what we're worth. These things happen all the time. So I imagine that by you um, choosing this path, it probably impacted you making lots of choices going forward. You're like, I choose to go this way. Like set you on, is it fair to say that it set you on that path of choosing yourself?
Absolutely. And so, not that I had not been in school very long, clearly at 7 years of age, but it directed my path because I wanted to be able to excel in school. And so I was always a strong student because I had this path and this journey ahead of me that was always in my vision, even at that very young age. And so it led me to just work hard, accept programs and challenges that would allow me to be in diverse groups, to be in groups of really smart people, people who are doing better than me, so that I could learn from them, to share my knowledge. And all of those things led to me eventually going to college and graduating, and having some different experiences. Even in college, I had this opportunity to have an internship, and it was in Texas where I knew no one. I had no transportation. And this was a time where we weren't digitized. So there weren't Google Maps, there wasn't GPS. But I said, I'm just going to go to Texas and I'm going to figure out how I get to work. So I got an apartment and I figured it out, and it worked out. And so I've always, I think to some degree, having that vision, lived on the edge of fear and uncertainty, because when you're uncomfortable like that, you can make different choices, as you said, and it can lead you to a path of greatness. And while it doesn't feel that way in the moment, always it can lead to something really powerful.
And I love that message that, and you also really put your action where your words are and did it, but you also make it sound like it wasn't hard. And I know that there were probably in your journey over the last few years from, getting into college, that probably, wasn't, getting in and getting through college and then all the way up ascending to where you are today. I mean, is there a place that sticks out or a memory that was really hard? And that's like a good segue into what we're going to talk about next is what is, been the mindset that's allowed you to, keep going. So, do you care to share any story about maybe where the road got a little bumpy and how you got past that?
Yeah, I'm thinking back into that period of time. People were like, how are you going to pay for college, first of all, because we didn't have the means for it. And so I worked hard to try to get some scholarships and grants and all those wonderful things. And also, it was interesting that while my teachers were always encouraging, and I was one of the top students in the class, it was, but can you compete when you go out kind of in that broader world with just the strong students that are elsewhere? And so there were always like these seeds of doubt. It was encouragement, but also seeds of doubt that were planted there. But I just chose not to embrace them and say, if anybody can see, why can't I? I'm just as good as anybody else, and I'm a hard worker. So it's really a mindset of, even when you come across obstacles or people are working against you to some degree, it's staying focused. And so that was not easy. It is a constant reminder that you have to put yourself first, but be clear on what the goal was. Because at 7 years old, I was clear of what I wanted my goal to be, and so I did not let others hamper me from that, despite the obstacles at times.
Yeah, and it just really seems like it makes me think about, when, I work with Olympians, a lot of that is similar in that they not only know what is their why, but they know who is their who. And you were clear about your why. You were also clear about who you were not going to be
Right.
and clear about who you were going to become. And that can be really powerful because it takes power away from what others think you're capable of, or what Brene Brown says is the people sitting in the cheap seats, what their opinions are.
I love that. Yes, and I love Brittany Brown. So yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's really not letting people define who you are, but remembering who you are each and every day. And if you get off kilter with that, is to just have that constant reminder, the quiet time. So yeah, that's worked for me throughout my life.
Yeah. And I always like to say for things that are negative, especially coming from the outside, to be the observer, not the judge. Hmm. Interesting. Like you're observing the things, but you can just not internalize them and take them as truth. And it
Yes.
sounds like you've really done a good job doing that. So, we also talked about earlier before we went live that the title of this episode is The Power of Being Afraid, which I love, 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 because those are the circles that I have worked in the last 25 years, whether it's with amazing executives like yourself or Olympians, and that's just the place where you play. And so, a lot of times when people look at this title, they might think, well, why, being afraid is uncomfortable. Why the title? So can you shine a little light on it and also share why it's been so powerful for you?
Yeah, I always think so. Fear, when you live kind of on that edge of fear, growth is right there. And once you do it enough times, you challenge yourself to live in that fear, and you see, not only did I survive it, I thrived. It becomes almost even this challenge for yourself. Okay, what's this next thing? What's this next fear? And so living in that space has been really helpful. When we originally met, I told you I have this book on my table that says, "Do something that scares you every day," and it can be something really small or it can be something very significant. But I have really, growing up, continued to try to do that, and there are definitely several stories that I can share about, where that came to be, and even something very practical that some people will relate to, is just when I got divorced. And when I got divorced, I had a daughter, and have a daughter, and she has special needs. And so I thought, ooh, that's scary. What's this going to look like? I don't know what's on the other side of that. That was absolutely a time of fear, but I was able to do it. To survive and have a great relationship with my ex-husband now, but also raise a very beautiful, caring, loving daughter who is the love of my life. And I survived that. And so seeing that play out, I'm actually able to apply that in other aspects, not only in my personal life, but in my professional life. And so even thinking about the first time that I had an opportunity to go into leadership, I was afraid and said, I don't want to ruin someone. I don't want to ruin someone's life. I don't want to be that leader that's talked about at night with the family.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I was so afraid of that. But I reflected upon other experiences that I had where I was able to, again, not only survive, but thrive, and leaned into that and found out that, guess what? People leadership is this beautiful thing that I love. And I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job with.
Well, yes, you're doing a pretty good job being in the C-suite and, being not just in the C-suite, but being celebrated in that role. So, that is really, really incredible. So, if you reflect and you did not embrace, because if you think about it, human beings are creatures of comfort. Like we like homeostasis, we like being comfortable, we don't really like the spotlight on us, we don't like getting in trouble, we don't like all these things. So if you think about if you had played safe, like look back the last 20 years, and if you had kind of done the safe thing rather than the courageous thing that was uncomfortable, would your life be 180 degrees different?
Very much so. And, I reflect on sometimes I think we condition ourselves to say no for the things that are different, that make us uncomfortable or just unfamiliar to us. And I had a great friend that I met that was, I think, a very important time in my life, where it was, you should ask yourself, why not? Because my instinct actually for a period of time was like, no, 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 no. I can't do that. After I was divorced, I was a single parent, and whether it was a career choice or personal choices, no, no, no. And I was challenged to pause and reflect on, if it's against your values, your morals, all of those things, then probably no is the path that you need to take. But if it's not that, ask yourself, why not? And I really took that to heart, and I still embrace that. That lives in my heart every single day. And I started doing like just these wild things that I would consider wild. I'm afraid of heights, or have grown up being afraid of heights, where I couldn't even stand on the second floor of the mall and lean over the railings, to hiking Camelback Mountain, doing zip lining. I love and just a variety of things that challenge that fear for myself. And I know I also told you that last year I faced a lifetime fear of learning how to swim. And I was so proud of myself for leaning into that, because I'd given up and said, Kim, you're never going to learn how to swim. And when we had the Olympic swim trials here in Indianapolis, where I'm located, last year, my CEO challenged me and said, you can be an inspiration to so many different people, because to be of this age and this stage of your life and still embracing something that's been really fearful for you, this challenge, you will inspire others. And turns out, not only did I learn how to swim, but I was able to encourage other people who saw me, and now they've learned how to swim.
I know. And if you could think about it, there's been a ripple effect because all those people are examples for other people. So you probably don't even know the impact. And, at the end of the day, you're helping to save lives, because
Yes.
there could very well be a situation where someone must know how to swim.
Yes, it is. The thing that was so profound for me is I was told, this is the only sport where you can actually save your life or save the life of someone else. And that meant something to me, and allowed me to just lean into that. So again, I look for those moments to just lean in. And I always say, if you do this, think about how you can apply this, again, not only personally, but professionally. And if you made it through this, you'll be fine here. And I am confident that I would not be in this role had I not had kind of that mantra of my life and stepped into some of those moments that have led me here.
Yeah, that is so amazing. And so for people listening, if then I'm going to ask you to look through a different lens. So as a leader, as a senior vice president, chief human resource officer, how can people lean into their fear at work? You know, it makes me think about, I was just speaking to another amazing leader yesterday, and she was talking about going on the offense in your career. And that seems so synergistic to the conversation that we're talking about. And there seems to be, at least in my coaching and training speaking, there's kind of an underlying fear
Mhm.
of what's happening. Things are, you know, a little bit feeling unstable generally. And so, how can people take advantage, not take advantage, but really use what you're talking about and the power of being afraid to really go on the offense in their career and become kind of, as Seth Godin says, a linchpin and be, you know, invaluable?
Yeah, I say the start of it is the root of it is one, remembering who you are and what your path is. And while this will seem a little cliche and maybe corny and cheesy to some people, I wrote out a personal vision and a professional vision for myself. And I said, what I don't want to have happen is I don't want to let life happen. I want to make life happen. And so I want to be an active participant in my life, every aspect of how I show up every day. And so I wrote out what it is that I want it to be. Not, and it wasn't necessarily this is the job that I want, this is the opportunity, but this is how I want to show up. This is how I want to add value, and then create some action steps around that, and be really clear with yourself about where you're not as strong and what can you do to work towards that to overcome those things, and then lean into it. I would also say, just as a practical step, is to say yes more. There are opportunities and probably jobs, assignments that we don't like, but those will be the moments actually that give us the tools that we can build upon to take us to that next step. We don't always, our path is not always the straight path that we think it is, and it plays out the way we think it should. I can think of times that the jobs, some opportunities and jobs in the past that I did not love at all, but those were the things that gave me the skill set and some tools that I'm again confident have helped me to be where I am today. Because you learn something from everything and you have to lean into that. What can I learn from this? What can I take from this? And how can I use it to apply in my life and also help others?
Yeah, I love that so much. But it seems like we shouldn't say yes to everything. Like it needs to be aligned in our values and also generally the path that we're going. So, do you have any tips or strategies on what's really important to say yes to?
Yes, yes. And I know this will sound redundant, but again, back to remembering who you are and remembering who you are, what you stand for. It is aligning things that stand with that. And so anything outside of your morals, your values, your belief, or even your path in terms of, is it something that conflicts with what your vision is? Those are the things that we should say no to. And if it's something um, that takes you away from being who you are, those are the things that we should say no to. And then I would also just say we need to have a balance in our lives. We can't say yes to everything, and sometimes it's yes at this point in time, no at this point in time, and then maybe something else comes out later. But we have to plan out things. We can't do everything all at once and feel like we're going to be successful. We have to be realistic about how those things play out for us.
Yeah, I love that so much. It kind of reminds me of, I was so inspired by Shonda Rhimes' book, The Year of Yes. And so she really speaks to some of the things that you're talking about. Um, and so that's so great. So, for people listening, what is your call to action? I mean, you've shared so much wisdom and that, you know, in the power of being afraid and how to exist outside your comfort zone and how it's shaped your career and impact, and honestly, how it's probably then impacted so many other people including your daughter, who I'm sure is paying close attention. What would be a call to action for the listeners?
I'd say take, again, sounding cliche again, but take some quiet time, not just on a day, but take quiet time for yourself, hopefully daily. But if not daily, finding those moments where you have clarity about what you want to do, who you are, and what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So many times, again, it's back to we let life happen for us instead of making life happen. And if we really stay focused on that, that can help move us into the right direction, and it keeps us focused on knowing we're off kilter. Back to when I wrote my personal and my professional vision, I was feeling off at different times, and I would go back and pull it out and say, "Are you living this?" And if I wasn't, looking at what I can actively change. And so all of us, again, if we just stay aligned on what it is and what's most important to us, we can do that. And there will be different priorities at different points in our lives. If we have families, children, we have partners, spouses, that there may be a period of time that we have to dedicate a bit more time over here. But again, having a path and a plan, and what we want to do, what we need to accomplish here, in addition to these things, and spacing them out, planning them out, help us to really get to that end goal in due time.
Yeah, that is such a great idea. And it's something that is really focused on and sustainable high performance. So without you and I even having a conversation about it, it's clear that you're already not just a high performer, but a sustainable high performer. And what would you say to people that are in meeting after meeting, like back to back to back to back to back, and they feel like they're on the hamster wheel and they're hearing what you're saying, but they're going, uh-oh, I don't do that. I don't know when I'm going to do it. What is your advice? And maybe can you give a glimpse into when you are able to do this or how people can start?
Yeah, actually, that happened to me this week. So, and it probably happens to us on a regular basis. First, I would say just some practical advice is that we have to challenge ourselves just to kind of get that balance and that clarity. Should we be in all of the meetings that we're in? Be clear about what's the purpose of that meeting. Should you be there? Are you the right person? Is it someone else? And can this be handled in some other way outside of a meeting? So I'd say that's just kind of the baseline practical advice that creates space for ourselves. But then if we don't have full control of our calendars, where we can't move a meeting, get out of a meeting, make sure that we take, whether it's time off from work, whether it's an hour, a half day, a full day vacation, or use the weekends or whatever day that we have that's available to us, and really carving out time where it might only be 5 minutes. If you can only get 5 minutes, because I know the way my life runs, sometimes I only get just a few minutes of time, but dedicate that time to yourself. And it's about being consistent. Even if it's only 5 minutes, make sure you do it regularly. And then that habit will become ingrained in you. And this maybe becomes 10 minutes, maybe becomes an hour, a half an hour. But if you dedicate the time to really focus on yourself, those minutes add up, and you start to change your thinking, change your behaviors, which actually ends into a different result. So again, that you can live the life that you want.
Yeah, I love that so much. And sometimes it helps to, or if you found this, to usually a new habit to link it onto something you're already doing. So,
Yes.
in other words, you take a half an hour for lunch, then it's a couple minutes before you enter back into the workplace, or you brush your teeth, you take a couple minutes of still time, or, something like that. But I just really want to reiterate what you said that's so important, and it's quality over quantity, consistency over quantity. So start with a couple minutes. That is invaluable advice, both personally and professionally. So, all right. Well, Kim, thank you so much for your time and your parting words to really have people slow down before they can, keep going and speed up. And I look forward to continuing to follow your journey.
Thank you so much. And such a pleasure to meet you and spend time with you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.